Next, we have chief communication officers are having their moment. Median compensation hit $900,000 to $1 million in 2025, with nearly half earning seven figures and some clearing $2 million a year. More than half now sit on executive committees, with a 17% increase in direct CEO reporting lines since 2023. Budgets are also increasing. 54% of CCOs now command more than $5 million size budgets. By every metric that matters to the C-suite, communications has arrived. But here's a bit of the uncomfortable part from this research. These newly elevated, highly compensated strategic leaders are just as lost on AI as everyone else. See last article. 1/3 of CCOs surveyed haven't defined their approach to AI-driven communications. AI use is widespread. 96% report using it, but mostly for basic stuff, things like content creation, media monitoring, and internal communications. The depth isn't matching the adoption rate. For comms professionals, this should sting a little bit. Internal communications acumen was the second most desired trait when CCOs hire, trailing only media relations skills. Yet when asked what their teams focus on, internal comms still plays second fiddles to corp comms, media relations, and crisis management. This Korn Ferry report includes a quote that's either inspiring or damning, depending on your mood. Quote, internal audiences are the most important audiences because, quote, the inside voices are also the outside voices. Leadership finally gets that employees are the story, and they're paying CCOs record salaries to manage that reality. Jenni, going back to this quote around internal audiences are the most important audiences, while simultaneously spending most of their budget on external comms, how long are we supposed to pretend that this gap doesn't exist?
So I feel like this report just articulates what people have probably thought for a long time, but action hasn't followed. So internal audiences are the most important audiences. It reminds me of a phrase that Rachel Miller uses a lot about what goes on the inside shows up on the outside. So it's that same ethos, really. And I think that's been talked about for a long time. I know I first heard that phrase at a conference, going back about 15 years ago. And I think leaders believe that. If we think about the things we've talked about over the last year, we've talked about leaders showing that employee engagement is the top of their list from the Institute of Leadership report. We've talked about the fact that the organizational success, that culture is really important to drive the growth people want, but they're not doing the work to actually make that a reality. And as you were reading this out about the AI piece as well, I was thinking, why is it so important that chief communications officers have an AI plan? Why is it not as important for finance or HR? Why is it just the CCOs that need to get this right? But it's because in the same paragraph, you're saying that organizations are really using AI for some of that basic stuff of content creation and things like that. So if there's no strategy from comms around how to use AI internally, it's going to get very messy and very chaotic very quickly. For me, this doesn't feel particularly new. I think the salaries are staggering, but I'm not seeing the leadership come along with that price, because that gap should be closing. If we've said that actually in 2025 this is what's going on, that gap should be closing if there is now somebody sitting on the executive committee. Otherwise, it really slams everyone's view that you have to have a seat at the table in order to have any influence. Well, this would prove that you actually don't, and that's nonsense.
Yeah, I see it as this, put your money where your mouth is. If you believe these internal audiences are so critical, then where's the budget to do it? And to your point, I think this just confirms some of that stress and frustration that we've heard from the industry around that, yeah, everybody says it's important, but you're not funding it. You're not putting resources behind it. I think the other interesting data point was they're saying now more than half sit on executive committees. I would have assumed all CCOs would have been on the executive committees. So that's even signaling me there's now a tier at some companies of the exec level, that C-suite is not just one level. There are levels within that C-suite. That was news to me. To your point, the salaries, while staggering, I don't know, perhaps might be encouraging to some people that are driven by that. So if you know that, so low long, it seemed like the CCO path was you had to come from marketing or PR to get there. So if internal audiences are this critical, maybe that is the path for people that are in internal comms to get to that role, knowing you probably need some other exposure as well. So yeah, nothing earth shattering here other than probably the dollar figures. And even I don't want to indict them on using AI for the basic stuff, because that goes back to my earlier point on our previous story, which is that's how you have to get started.
Yeah.
You have to get using it in ways that make sense to you so that you can explore ways that might make sense for the business. So I think they kind of viewed it as like basic as like a negative, where I see that as like sometimes that's foundational things for people to start experimenting and playing.